Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the wonderful people across the great state of Mississippi who are working so hard to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Now, look, I've got a great show today. We're going to talk about an upcoming event. We're going to have conversations about some difficult subjects, but one that we have been talking about on this show for some time now, and that is suicide, specifically teen suicide, and mental health in general. And we're gonna cross all those bridges. But my old friend Emma Benoit, who will tell you more about her here in just a second, if you haven't heard us talk before, and Paige Roberts, the president and CEO of the Jackson County Chamber, will both be joining me today. Emma and Paige, how you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing well.
Good. So Paige, starting with you. You know, Emma has had such a tremendous impact on you and me and so many people like us as we really try to focus on mental health. I mean, especially the mental health of young people. When you're telling people about Emma, how do you talk about Emma? So I could tell her story, as we have done more than once, but I want to talk about sort of a more updated version of how you talk about her these days.
I talk about Emma, about the wisdom that comes out of Emma's mouth. I think that her experience, as scary and traumatic as it was, has really led her to be a conduit of education and understanding from a perspective that we can't even imagine. I think for her to have been in a place so dark and then miraculously come out of it and gone through the intensive therapy that she did, and then have the heart to share that with other young people and their parents and educators and everyone that makes up our community, it's just all an act of divinity, and that's she's a blessing, and I think her purpose and calling is being fulfilled, and we all are benefiting from it.
When the summer before her senior year in high school, Emma attempted suicide, and she lived. But the spinal cord injury that resulted in the work that you've had to put into that, and then the ultimate inspiration you got from finding yourself in that moment and realizing that you had made a mistake and wanted to live, and now you live, and you inspire others. Excuse me, I'm about to choke. And you inspire others the way that you do. It has been one heck of a journey for you, hasn't it, Emma?
Certainly. I don't even think there's words to really describe everything that I've been through and have overcome. And when I take time to just really reflect on everything that I've overcome and gone through, it's miraculous, even for me, having been the individual going through it, to just look back and see all of the things that I experienced, and to be here today, still using those experiences to try and raise awareness and spread hope. And like Paige said, really educate parents and teachers and students on the real reality of what mental health challenges can look like for so many of us. And so when I look back on everything that I've been through and overcome, it's like I said, there's no words to really describe it, but the one thing that I always come back to is, like Paige said, just an act of divinity, just a sheer miracle. And I firmly believe that this is one of my main purposes in this life, is to use what I've been through to try and change lives for the better.
And boy, are you doing a admirable job at that. So why don't you update listeners on how you're doing today? I want to congratulate you on your upcoming marriage.
Yeah.
But also the amount of time and energy you're putting into touching as many young people as you possibly can. That in itself is inspiring. So update us on how you're doing today.
Yeah, I'm doing amazing. I really could not have wished for a better future for myself, and to see it unfold has been truly a blessing. Like you said, I'm getting married in March, so it's coming up really quickly. And I'm just so blessed with the people that I have in my life, and getting to meet people like yourself and Paige and you, Ricky, along the way in this journey has been so fulfilling for me. And I hope to be able to continue doing what I've been doing for the last 7 years. I've been honored with blessings to be able to travel the country, sharing my story, speaking in schools and for communities and for conferences and organizations who just want to learn and educate themselves on better ways to talk about mental health. So that's really what I've been doing. That's been my focus, and just kind of amplifying and utilizing my voice with the resources that I do have to my disposal, as in people like yourself. Singing River Health Systems has been a phenomenal resource for me to really just help amplify my message and my voice by hosting events like we're going to get to do next Tuesday. So I am very much still on the mission to use my story and my voice to help advocate for suicide prevention, so that way others know that suicide, while it is a real experience, it does not need to be the option or the answer that we turn to. So,
well, listening to your talk reminds me that after the first time we met, I sent you a long email, almost a developmental plan, because I think you're a phenomenal. In fact, it was a developmental plan. I couldn't help it. But I see tremendous skills in you, and obviously the very first thing that I see is really an incredible ability to communicate. You are a very, very articulate young person, and then when you tell your story, which I've had the opportunity to hear you tell your story, not just here on the show, but at an event. It's the way you do it, the empathy that you share, the way you're able to connect to young people. This is one of those things, Emma, you got to get it while the getting's good. You have to strike now, because you're still young and you still can connect. And as you get older, you'll still be able to connect, but won't be able to in the way that you can now. Do you see that? Do you see a sense of urgency around sort of the time frame that you're dealing with?
Absolutely. And as I've been able to do this as I'm growing up, it's certainly become more kind of prevalent to me that, I am still very relatable to these youth, but as, we evolve and we grow as a people group in society, things change naturally. So I'm very aware of that. And I do tend to think about that whenever I have opportunities to present to our youth. But my biggest thing is always remaining relatable in the sense of knowing where they're at mentally and emotionally and the things that they're dealing with in their realities. So I try to stay up to date on the things that our youth are going through, the new sort of nuanced things that maybe my generation went through, but differently. So I try to stay sort of relevant, so to speak, while, maintaining the truth and essence of my story, but also integrating it with what they're going through unique to the time. And like I tell people all the time, if I can continue to use my lived experience in some way, shape, or form, whether it evolves outside of the high school setting and into more of the young adult, early adulthood setting, then I'm here to do that. Really and truly, I will go anywhere that I'm called. I have firm beliefs that this is my purpose. And so, like I said, if I am called to go give a talk to students in a school, or if I'm called to go give a talk to elderly in a hospice facility, I would do it, because my perspective on my story as a whole is that every generation can find something within my lived experience to relate to and take away with them. So I do think about it, but the thoughts about it are more along the lines of positive thinking of how I can continue to evolve my message while keeping it sort of relevant for the younger generations.
I think, Ricky, that what she just articulated goes to the wisdom I was referring to at the top of the hour. That's that's profound wisdom in someone in her early 20s to see that. But I would agree wholeheartedly that her message about life and wellness and how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and what our place is in this world is relevant regardless of the generation, even though she was 17, Emma, when you tried to take your own life?
16, yeah.
16,
So what is so interesting is the way you talk about it. There's so much wisdom in what you're saying, but the reality is that you want to be relevant, and the experience is something that you can share and you'll be able to share 10 years from now. But the situation changes, like the pressure on young people changes. The role that social media, while it played a role in yours, it's tenfold more important today than it was back then. The role that vulnerability plays is probably very similar today. I mean, vulnerability is what it is. It's, as you describe it, it's a strength, not a weakness. When we come back on the other side, we'll kind of pick it up from right there. I also want to make sure we talk about what's happening next Tuesday and why this conversation is relevant now. And we will do that when we continue our conversation with Paige Roberts and Emma Benoit on the other side. We'll see you after this. As I have said many times on this show, and by the way, welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio, there is a powerful lubrication to change that comes from pain. And when you're looking at teen suicide in a community, it creates a tremendous amount of pain. And there is going to be tremendous focus on how we can change. What can we do as a collective community to address the pain that we're feeling? Because suicide is so final. And too often, kids, and this is really anyone, they're trying to relieve the pain, not necessarily do something so final. And that's something we want to talk about before we get too much further into this conversation. But in this particular case, with a number of teen suicides in specifically Jackson County, but obviously not just Jackson County, but this is what sort of spurred this conglomerate of partners, both private and public, coming together and saying, what can we do to make a difference in the community? It led them ultimately to a suicide attempt survivor, Emma Benoit. And the work continues. And the work has continued in a very positive way. When I'm talking to Representative Sam Creekmore, for example, in the House of Representatives, and he is aware of Hope Squad. We'll talk more about that here in a second as well, and the efforts of Paige and Emma and others. Then that means that we are beginning to get into the public consciousness of the people that matter, who can lead change and who can fund efforts like Hope Squad, but not exclusive to Hope Squad, because other things could come up as well. So it's exciting to have the opportunity to visit again with Emma and Paige and stay focused on how can we address the pain our community felt and maybe, just maybe, impact it in a positive way so less people feel that kind of pain in the future. So that's the purpose of this conversation. So what's happening next Tuesday, Paige?
Yes, next Tuesday, Emma will be speaking at an event sharing her story at the Pascagoula Performing Arts Center. As she mentioned, the primary sponsor and really guide of having her here is Singing River Health Foundation, and she will come at 6 p.m. to the Performing Arts Center, as I said, and it is open to the public. We, the Chamber, as well as Singing River Health System, has sent out the flyers to targeted audiences, but also letting, just as many people as we can know that they are invited. We especially encourage parents and parents of teenagers and teenagers themselves. I believe that there will be a time, and Emma, you can speak to this more directly, but a time afterward where the students just gravitate to Emma following her speaking. And it sort of reminds me a little bit of Taylor Swift, the way that they just flock to her and line up, even wanting to share their thoughts and feelings from what she said. And as I said, it's open to the public. If anyone wants any more information, they can call the Jackson County Chamber of Commerce about that. But Emma, I'm curious, what kinds of things do you hear from those students right after a speaking event when they are lining up and really kind of enveloping you to be in your presence and your sphere to share with you?
Well, Paige, I'll tell you, there are so many parallels on what I hear from students and youth when they come to speak to me after I've shared and presented. The most common parallel that I'm noticing is that they are appreciative that someone shared their story in a way of authenticity and vulnerability, and not in a way of shameful, judgmental kind of approach. So it's really, they are appreciative and thankful for the approach that I took when I decided to share my story, in the sense of how real and how raw they can relate to it and how it feels for them to receive what I share. And really and truly, pretty much every student that comes and speaks to me shares similar things. Thank you for sharing. This made me feel less alone. Hearing your story showed me that I was not the only one. Hearing your story encouraged me to seek help. Hearing your story encouraged me to go talk to my mom and dad, and showed me that I was not alone in my feelings. So it's a culmination of feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling hope, and knowing what next step to take, because they learn from the way that I handled my struggles, and they learn sort of what not to do from my story. So it's kind of a combination of those things, but every single time I get the honor to speak to a student, I'm just overjoyed and fulfilled, because this is why I do it. This is why I put myself out there on the stage to share my darkest, most vulnerable moments of my life for these youth, for them to recognize the struggles within themselves, and to know that it's okay not to feel okay, and to know where to go to get the help.
Paige, I have a follow-up, but before I ask my follow-up, do you have a follow-up? Does something else come to mind while you were listening to her?
Well, it fills my heart with joy and hope, because it is heartbreaking to know that children or anybody does not feel heard or seen. We all need to be heard and seen. So to know that we are playing a part in helping Emma serve in that role is almost overwhelming, because it's so needed and it's so important, and our world can be so hard, and the children are the ones suffering the most, that I'm just so thankful to God for saving Emma and putting her in our path, and you, Ricky, and just all of us, all of our partners. It's very profound.
You think about this, where you hope conversations like this will do on this show, at that event, informal discussions that take place, and anything else we can conjure up to address. It's okay to have conversations about this, and vulnerability is a strength, etc. The more we talk about it, I think the more, let's just say, for example, there are probably parents and grandparents who are listening to this conversation today. And I don't know of a grandparent or a parent who hasn't thought about this. If they've got kids that are teenagers that are going through the pressures of what teenagers go through today, who haven't worried about it, to say, am I missing something? Is there more that I can do, etc. And what you're doing to them after your speeches, after your talks, Emma, is really what parents and grandparents can do, and that is simply just open up to them and listen to them. Are you ever shocked with what you hear from the young people that you talk to?
The one thing that shocks me when I hear it is that up until them witnessing me share my story, they had never heard anyone in their life be so vulnerable and forthcoming with the reality of these struggles. That is shocking to me because of, well, frankly, the climate that we live in, socially, emotionally. I mean, to not have ever experienced anyone in your circle who has had struggles in this way is shocking in the sense of it not feeling like the real truth of life, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So that's
Yeah.
a shock to me because when I hear that, I automatically think, well, that means that you have not been around authentically vulnerable people before. And so that is alarming to me. And it's constantly alarming to me because I've heard this same sort of statement made just in different wording before.
Yeah, I see that clearly. How many have admitted to you that they have contemplated suicide?
Unfortunately, countless. A
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
many young people.
It's interesting. We live in a time, just think about it, just take social media and set it aside for a second. Everybody's busy, busy, busy. They're moving fast. And, you know, too many parents, I'll just say it like it is. Too many parents are busy in their own lives. And as long as they're not hearing screaming and issues, they think everything is okay. So out of sight, out of mind, kinda, and everything is okay. And what they should contemplate is that aside from social media, that the pressures that young people are under today are immense. And then you add social media into that if they happen to have it, and too many do have it. My daughter's a teacher, incidentally, and she is continually shocked at the number of very young people, third graders, whose parents give them phones. It's amazing to me for the purpose of being in touch, but then they have access to God only knows what. When we come back, we'll pick it up from there because I want to talk a little bit more about vulnerability and a statement that you made on some show or something along the way that I made note of that I think is incredibly powerful and probably at the heart of everything that we would talk about. We'll continue this conversation with Emma Benoit and my friend Paige Roberts after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I have my friend Paige Roberts from the Jackson County Chamber and someone I consider a friend, Emma Benoit. She's inspired me. And for folks who've heard her on this show before and maybe even been to her programs, I'm sure she has inspired you too. The quick little paragraph about you in your biography that I think kind of sums it all up. It said this, Emma Benoit became extremely passionate about suicide prevention after surviving a suicide attempt in 2017, the summer before her senior year in high school. Her attempt resulted in a spinal cord injury that left her paralyzed, but helped her find faith and purpose and propelled her on a mission to use her painful experience and miraculous recovery to help others. And we're going to talk a little bit about vulnerability for a second, but you still have challenges, physical challenges, but you've made terrific progress given the nature of your injury, haven't you, Emma?
Certainly. The doctors were shocked and couldn't really put answers to my recovery. They gave me a 1% chance to walk. And I mean, just to be transparent, the injury that I sustained is typically a fatal injury. Losing access to blood in the left side of your brain is typically fatal pretty instantly. And it's a miracle the way that, I have been able to overcome and survive so many things that medical professionals are just sort of dumbfounded around. And the recovery that I've been able to make with my physical abilities has been also a miracle. Being able to walk again, stand again, drive a vehicle again, all of the things that, we all take for granted. Being able to do those things again is nothing more than a miracle.
And as I mentioned, soon to be married, and what a beautiful story that is. And, I don't have to talk to you about living in the moment, do I?
No, that is something I do very well. I am where my feet are.
Yeah, that's something I really commit myself to as well. Hey, listen, we're going to talk about vulnerability, but before we shift gears, though, I wanted to hear how you would talk about Paige Roberts when you're talking to people. Have you ever met anybody like her before?
No, the one and only Paige Roberts is a spectacular human being, and I can only speak highly of her whenever I have opportunities to share about the amazing work that I've been privileged to do in your county, Jackson County. It always brings so much gratitude to my heart and joy to my face. And I just can't say enough good things about her. The work that she has done in the community, her commitment and devotion to the people of Jackson County is truly remarkable. And I think if every county, every parish too, don't want to leave Louisiana out there, every place in the country could benefit with a Paige Roberts. She is spectacular.
I cannot agree more. Boy, we talk on this show a lot about volunteers and people who work in the community who give their heart and soul to make this a better community. And we're lucky in Mississippi. I mean, I think every state would probably say this about themselves, but because Mississippi has had to deal with so many really substantial moments in our history, we're very resilient. And we love our neighbors. And when the going gets tough, it doesn't matter what your political system is. People have a tendency to want to reach out and help each other. But we have we have so many people, community servants, who are out there filling gaps to see where we need to deploy our leadership and our money and our collaborative efforts to try to make an impact. And this is just one of many areas that Paige has operated in that way, and it's a gift to have her in the community. I see that clearly. We have a little work going on in our house, so I apologize for the little bam, bam, bam in the background. So what I want to come back to, I mentioned it a couple of times, this whole notion of vulnerability. I captured this, and I chatted with you a little bit about it off the air, but it must have been an interview you gave or something, but it was so powerful, I captured it word for word, and here's what you said. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It's the source of hope and empathy and accountability and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. And then, in fact, I made some notes about this on my own about that being vulnerable is really a gift. And unfortunately, because of the world that we live in today, the social media world especially that we live in today, people cannot be invulnerable, period. And when you're not invulnerable or believe that you're not invulnerable, of course, then when you go to the quietness of your own thoughts, you really sense your vulnerability and it scares you. It creates huge mental conflicts, doesn't it, Emma?
Oh, the largest conflicts mentally and emotionally. When you suppress your vulnerability, you are suppressing, in essence, your true self. And that is why I am a huge proponent for authentic, vulnerable dialogue that I believe can ultimately reframe people's perspectives. When you sit across from someone who's struggling and they choose to be vulnerable and honest and truthful with not only you, but with themselves, to lay it all out there. And I say just kind of like, getting all the gunk out. That's what it feels like when you choose to step into vulnerability. You're just getting all of the gunk out and you're sharing it with someone who accepts your vulnerability. There's no greater feeling or solution from my perspective and my experience than choosing vulnerability every single time. Whenever you're angry, choose vulnerability because you can identify the root cause of that anger and lean with love as opposed to resentment and all of the negative things that come from feelings like anger and frustration. So every single time that we experience any emotion, we have the opportunity to choose vulnerability over, I guess, a curated image that we want to portray to the public. And when you constantly portray that image to the public, now you have a mask to maintain. And that is kind of essentially my story leading up to my attempt. I never chose vulnerability. I always chose to lead with that mask. And in doing so, that caused more hurt and more pain internally. So the switch really is leaning into vulnerability and choosing a loving approach for yourself and for others around you.
And for grandparents and parents who are listening, what's important that I remember so well about your story is that your parents confused they what they thought was more rebellion was really more depression. And as it related to you being anywhere near in the state of mind that you were in, they were really in the dark. And that was something your family had to ultimately come to grips with, isn't it?
Yes. And to have that realization was so profound for them, to be able to see that their ideas of my struggles were not actually the reality of my struggles, and to be able to, it was sort of like a dichotomy in a way. Like they felt like they knew everything that I was experiencing, but ultimately they really didn't. And so that's also something I'm seeing a lot with teenagers and their parents and grandparents is, this idea that a person with a seemingly good life isn't really allowed to have the space to suffer mentally and emotionally. And because of the things that we all grow up hearing, while probably well-intended and meant for good, they sort of in a way contribute to this belief that certain people don't struggle, certain people won't struggle, right? So I think it's about really removing that stigma and that false image that unfortunately my parents thought to be true, and really just learn to unpack the layers with a person. And that starts with vulnerability. You can't really get to know someone truly without being vulnerable. So I always encourage parents, grandparents, teachers, guardians, hey, work on that relationship. Make sure that you know your kiddo through and through. You know what makes them tick. You know what aggravates them. You know what their triggers are. Because in knowing all of that, you're going to be able to sort of safeguard in a way whenever they start to struggle. And you're going to be able to notice it a little bit better than if you were to just assume that those aren't the signs to be looking for, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Hey, Paige, I'm thinking about, as I throughout my career, whether it was leading big community efforts and being criticized because I was the publisher leading those efforts and people didn't think I could be objective if I did that, or whether it was major corporate change efforts that impacted people's lives. I remember reading the comments, and of course, these in the early days, well, not necessarily in the early days of the internet. Certainly it started that, but throughout my career, I got to watch the role the internet played in change efforts and the role that social media played in change efforts. And I remember, personally having that feeling of how it hurt that people would have that impression, that wrong impression. And I eventually had to really I'm an adult, and obviously, and that doesn't mean I'm immune, I might add, but that I'd had enough experiences in my life that helped me develop coping skills, and I developed them and I dealt with it. But I think about what I drew on, the experiences I drew on as a paramedic and my own life experiences, and it was still painful. And I think about young people who may be going through that, and it may be as simple as making an Instagram post where someone comments that you're fat, or that you need to lose weight, or you're not very pretty, or what it might be. I think about that, and they don't have any of those life experiences to draw on to help them cope. And when we come back on the other side, I'll give you an opportunity to speak to that, Paige, and then we'll talk about what is the goal of next Tuesday. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. It's an important conversation. It's not always easy to have. But it's something we should all contemplate and think about. Do we truly have authentic relationships with the people around us? And if we don't necessarily, especially the people we love, the people who are part of our universe, then we should really think about it and see what we can do to maybe right that ship. You never know what you're going to learn when you share your own vulnerabilities, and then elicit maybe those you love sharing their vulnerabilities with you. You just never know where that conversation is going to go. And in your case, Emma, someone who probably to people, appeared to have this perfect world, you were hiding a lot, weren't you?
Yes. I was hiding pretty much everything that I felt. It was mainly because of the fear around the stigma. I was terrified for people to look at me differently, view me differently, not give me certain opportunities because of my mental health struggles. So because of that stigma, that's sort of why I continue to perpetuate this narrative that I'm all good, I'm fine, everything's great. And it was sort of like a protective mechanism that I was utilizing to try and protect myself from the fear of judgment and criticism from others. And all along, had I known what I know now, I would have certainly done things differently. And so that's why I'm so grateful to be able to educate you with youth and the younger generations on how to approach your harder emotions and your vulnerable feelings in a different way than I did.
Yeah, when we went to break, I mentioned the role that social media has played, continues to play. And with all the studies and all that we know, still nothing really too dramatic has happened to change that situation. And it's sad because we know so many really young people in general, but especially young women, are being drugged into this world of perceived perfection or need to be, perfect. What do you say to parents that ask you, talk to me about what age is the right age? I mean, how do I handle this?
I don't really know that there is a right age. I do think, though, that in order to not struggle so greatly with social media, there needs to be a firm foundation of self-identity and self-worth. And that age kind of varies, right? Like some 13-year-old kids know who they are and they're secure in themselves, but most of them aren't. So I would say too early would be 8th grade. Anything past that, I think, is good. I would say high school students should be okay on social media, but ultimately we all struggle on social media with this perception of perfectionism. So knowing the real risk of comparison and feeling not good enough, feeling like you don't have enough, it's going to be relevant no matter what age you are. So I would just encourage parents to really think about the kind of person that your youth is. And before you decide to go down the rabbit hole of getting a phone, installing social media apps, putting parental controls on those apps, before you go down that whole rabbit hole, make sure that your kiddo knows who they are and why they're special and what makes them special. And they know that the internet is a false projection of reality. I think that's kind of a good place to start. But then again, who's to really say, you know?
I mean, one of the things that when I'm flipping on my phone, of course, lots of random stuff, but every now and then a young person will come up and I will think, God, how old is that kid? Who are the parents that let that kid own this? Mm-hmm. And it's just shocking. It's shocking to me. I never cease to be amazed at the kind of access and the kind of content that's out there from very, very young people. It's sad, and hopefully parents will pay attention to that.
Well, I will say really quickly on that topic, I feel as though there is an overprotection of the real world and an underprotection of the digital world, especially with our youth. Yeah. And I think that's a very big problem.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole show in itself, but I get it.
Yeah.
What do you want to happen next Tuesday, Paige?
I want people to come hear Emma's story and then after hearing it, go out into their spheres of influence and have conversations, whether it's with their children or their coworkers or people at their church, with their friends, but to just talk about the various points that she makes, whether it's on the importance of not just being vulnerable ourselves, but being comfortable with other people, being vulnerable in our presence, because that can really make some people uncomfortable. The just being real. I think if they just go out and they take one thing from what she says and work on one behavior around that, then we're doing something better than what we were doing before.
Well, Paige, the next time we're together, we'll update on how we're doing with it as it relates to the Hope Squad, a really important deliverable. And Emma, God bless you. I enjoy every minute we spend together. You inspire me to make sure we continue to keep this topic front and center. Thank you so much for what you're giving to all of us.
Thank you.
You bet. This has been Paige Roberts and Emma Benoit. Listen, have a great day, and look up that event next Tuesday night. I think you'll be glad you did. God bless you, and have a great day.